morning, everyone, and welcome. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I hope you've all had an incredible evening and are ready to kick off day 2 of the Forecasting Healthy Futures Global Summit 2023. I can't hear that. I can't hear that. Where's the energy? Yes. I hope you enjoyed yesterday as much as I did, because I tell you what an incredible action-packed program it was. It was unbelievable. We kicked off with an opening address from the head of the World Health Organization. We had a live report from the Lancet Countdown, and we heard from dozens of the global experts amongst you on a myriad of topics ranging from AI to community-led initiatives as well. And as we saw from our rich discussions and presentations yesterday, the connection between climate and health is deep and undeniable, and it is one that has been long underestimated. And so when leaders from around the world met for COP27 last year, we saw some significant commitments on climate action, but unfortunately, when we were looking at the overall funding and the prioritization of health, that fell short. And so we were incredibly excited to hear yesterday a momentous declaration from His Excellency Majid al-Suwaidi, the Director General of COP28, when he addressed us here at the summit and announced that COP28 will officially include a global health day. It's going to be bringing together member states and partners to move commitments towards action and to create a space for negotiations and critical health issues like the ones that we have been discussing here at the summit. This is big. This is the first time that this is going to be happening, and we heard it here first. It's amazing. What a fantastic validation as well for the agenda that we have set up for you. And so today will not be any different. We have a fantastic blend of topics with insights from a wide variety of experts as well. And everything that we have been seeing, that we have been hearing throughout the summit, has been uncovering those deep challenges for the health sector in adapting and mitigating the impacts of climate change, as well as the opportunities that exist and that are emerging through new technologies, new collaborations, and new ways of thinking. And so to that, today we're looking to future generations. It is important to note that as part of the UAE's commitment to youth, Her Excellency Shama al-Mazroui, the UAE Minister of Community Development, is the first ever youth climate champion with a ministerial role for COP28. And so today we are thrilled to be kicking off our program with a panel of youth advocates for action against climate change with the future stewards, youth champions, their protection and empowerment. So to moderate this fantastic panel, I have the pleasure of introducing Sohini Chatterjee, Managing Director of Global Policy and Advocacy at Malaria No More. Before joining MNM this year, Sohini served as Senior Policy Advisor to the US Ambassador to the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Sohini.
Thank you, Sally. It's such a privilege to kick off day 2 with this extraordinary group of youth activists. I've had the pleasure of getting to know them over the last couple of days and have been inspired by the work that they're doing and the work that they want to continue to do. And I hope that by the end of this session, you all will be inspired too, because I think their dedication to climate change and health is really unparalleled. We all have seen, I think, over the last decade, the way that youth voices have really propelled this kind of movement of making climate change relevant in the multilateral space. They've made it urgent. They've been fearless in their activism. And, you know, their stories of how they came to this work are quite amazing. And I think you'll get a glimpse of that during this session. We've seen, I think, that the World Economic Forum has just released a statistic that more than 70% of youth globally are very, very worried about climate change. We've seen some real progress over the last decade, but there's still, of course, so much work to be done. And this crew here is going to tell you about some of that work that we all need to support going forward. Just to mention a few things, you know, we've had some progress. Obviously, they're going to talk about COP27 and some of the milestones. They're going to look ahead to COP28 and what needs to be done. You know, as I said, they've really kind of made climate change urgent in the multilateral community, especially at the UN. In 2015, UN Security Council Resolution 2250 was passed. It was a milestone resolution that was focused on climate change and a global coalition on youth, peace, and security. We've heard talk about youth, peace, and security since then, but as with all UN Security Council resolutions, I think the question is, what does it mean on the ground? What does it mean for the work of these extraordinary people? And is it being implemented, and what more can we do to make sure that it is? So with that, I'll turn it over to our speakers. Our first speaker is Omnia Omrani, who is a medical doctor, Dr. Omnia, who is a new friend of mine. And she's been really an extraordinary voice in this space. She was the first official youth envoy for the president of the 27th UN Climate Change Conference, COP27, and the Egyptian Minister of Foreign Affairs. She's a climate change and health junior policy fellow at Imperial College London, and also a medical doctor with more than 7 years of experience in climate change. She's facilitated over 74 hours of training sessions in 15 countries globally. She's a commissioner at the Lancet Chatham House Commission on Post-COVID Population Health, a youth sounding board member of the European Union DG INTIPA, an associate at Women Leaders for Planetary Health, and a member of the Global Youth Coalition for Road Safety and UNICEF AZ Youth Leaders Program. Omnia, over to you.
Yes. So first of all, thank you so much for having me at this very important convening at the beginning of the year, and really setting a powerful health agenda for next COP as well as for the climate space. But I'd like to share why is it important for young people, because currently we are 1.8 billion and we are asked to shoulder the impacts of climate change on our health and well-being. Human activities that are leading to the increase in carbon emissions, such as the burning of fossil fuels, has been taking away our homes, our education, our drinking water and sanitation, and the very air that we breathe. A very recent study showed that a child that is born today is going to experience 8 times the rate of extreme weather events compared to a person who was born in 1960. We are seeing the acute impacts of climate change, extreme weather events happening acutely, but also on the chronic level when it comes to air pollution, drought, and so on. And at the same time, this leads to the impacts on our physical health, and at the same time, our mental health, from anxiety to depression to burnout, especially in young climate activists, but also to increased rate of death by suicide, all due to our worry regarding the climate crisis and its impacts. But at the same time, we always ask the question of when are we going to stop destructing our natural habitat and pushing our ecosystem to a tipping point. But as young experts, we are not waiting for answers. We are rising to the climate challenge, and we're doing it with our creativity, our solutions. And this is why we're also using a human rights-based approach, because we see that the climate crisis is a human rights crisis, and we have a right to a healthy environment that supports our health and our future and prosperity. And right before COP, we published a commentary in the BMJ looking at how young people around the world, and adolescents as well, are using a human rights-based approach, looking at the elements of equality, of participation, non-discrimination, and accountability in the efforts that we are leading. And in Egypt, when we were chosen as the host for COP27, we wanted to focus on participation and really bringing in a meaningful transformation in the way that young people participate in the climate space. And that is why I was appointed to really bring in a voice, and I was mandated to bring in the perspectives and the demands of young people to the presidency, which is responsible to facilitate the negotiation process and bring countries on track to their climate commitments. And one of the key milestones that we really worked on is first creating a space for young people to share and to co-create their demands and policy actions with the key actors. We created 2 roundtable discussions. We brought in the ministers, the negotiators, and the chairs of the country groups alongside the young climate experts. Young experts were given the floor first to speak, to share their demands, and really bring in the importance of us not just being seen as victims to the climate crisis, but as partners and natural actors to this agenda. And afterwards, we also created for the first time a children and youth pavilion, which was an independently youth-led space hosting over 100 events along the 2 weeks of COP. We had a mandate that at least 65% of the speakers in any event at that pavilion were under 35, to really bring in the importance of having a space that is independently made by us and for us. And most importantly, we made sure that all of these milestones were integrated in the COP27 outcome decision, which is adopted by 170 countries that have ratified the Paris Agreement, so that we are mandating the next presidency to appoint a youth champion, to also create that pavilion, to create these dialogues, and having a way forward and a way to really build on these milestones. And one thing I also wanted to share, that we saw that there was a gap that always persists when it comes to commitments and implementation. And that is why we always said that this was the implementation COP, and we are very looking forward to COP28 to really paving the way of this implementation. And we saw how young people were already doing that when it comes to climate change and health, looking at the integration of health in mitigation and adaptation. A few examples I'd love to share. For example, young climate agri entrepreneurs in Africa, they were designing their own small-scale solutions, such as drought-resistant seedlings to combat crop failure, also building the capacity of farmers to use sustainable practices that saves water, and also teaching vulnerable communities, especially women and girls, to create briquettes, which is a sustainable way of generating energy in a way that is sustainable. And in Egypt, when it comes to mitigation, a group of young Egyptian entrepreneurs created the very first solar-powered water heaters to vulnerable communities, because they saw how the use of kerosene was really impacting their health and the air quality, and at the same time providing an affordable way of heating water. And last thing I wanted to also highlight, which Dr. Kimberly touched upon yesterday, which is really transforming education to integrate climate change. And in Egypt, we had my university integrated climate change for the first time across not just the medical faculty, but all faculties, to really integrate and show that climate change and planetary health in the broader perspective is really linked, and students need to be well prepared to face that. And then finally, it's very important to acknowledge that when it comes to the climate science, it's clear, especially its impacts on health, and the solutions are there. What's missing is really working together with young experts as allies to really address and to hopefully end the climate and climate justice crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Omnia. So as I said, these activists are really on the forefront of this battle and have made it relevant, I think, for all of us and made it urgent for all of us. I have some questions for you, but I'll save them, as I imagine you will, so that we can turn to our next speaker. Dr. Deena Mariyam is a resident of UAE. She's passionate about working for the welfare of people, and her life dream is actually to attain universal health coverage. She is currently pursuing an MSc in public health from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. She has been a leader in the healthcare sector and has been involved in a number of NGOs. She's been doing voluntary work and has excelled in sort of her advocacy efforts on climate change throughout the globe. She's been an active worker among youth for many years. Her focus is climate health with a strong emphasis on climate education. And she thinks it's the most sort of urgent need of the hour. She's an organizing committee member of MENA Climate Week youth events and is currently serving her term as a Youngo Health Working Group Secretary, which is the official youth constituency of UNFCCC. Deena, over to you.
Thank you so much, everyone here, to have us. And I think I would start off with what Sohini had mentioned of the UN process. We are having a lot of language, and we're not having a lot of implementation, and even reflecting on Omnia, explaining how there's lack of implementation. So reflecting on a small kind of survey we had, from the Youngo Health Working Group, there were 16 delegates who identified as youth and health advocates, but only one of them had a party badge. The rest, all of them had a civil society badge. So this speaks volumes that there's still lack of party representation and countries giving access to youth in the negotiating table. So we need to work on that. And now I will start off with what is the Youngo Health Working Groups. As Sohini already mentioned, Youngo is the official youth constituency of UNFCCC. We have a lot of working groups, and one of the working groups is the Health Working Group, and we majorly focus on health-related agendas and negotiation topics and coverage, advocacy, research, everything which comes under the climate change and health agenda. So these are our objectives. It's basically bringing youth networks on the table and having a discussion, having knowledge sharing. So these are our recommendations. We have a global youth statement published by Youngo, and that was given to the COP27 presidency. And under the global youth statement, we have a section of health, which was curated by the Health Working Group, and you can have a look at that. I would mention, I'll have a QR code so you can just scan it and have a look at the entire report. But giving a crux of what was our recommendation, majorly having knowledge sharing, research, and using technologies to combat the climate crisis, especially since the organizing co-chair of this event is Malaria No More. So combating infectious diseases, combating food systems, combating disaster management, and having youth in the climate change and health policies. This is our work. So we have already published the health policy paper under the GYS of Youngo. And we encourage youth delegation at the high-level forum. Saddening that party delegations are not much, but we hope we have more party delegates in COP28. Then we are working on a health policy toolkit or a handbook which is more accessible to the reader and to a young health advocate who's working on ground. And we also work on collaboration, so any stakeholder here or globally can reach out to us and collaborate. So this is a QR code. And now I would like to mention a few on-ground work certain youth within the health working group are doing. And that would give you an idea of how we work and how we would like to collaborate. Number one, something I've been working on is the early childhood development and climate change. So I am very passionate about pediatric health, and I really would want to pursue pediatrics in the near future. And early childhood development just doesn't, comprise of like after you're born, but it also comprises of when the child or the life is in the womb. So there has been increasing mortality rate because of heat, and we need robust financing mechanisms for protecting the health of young children, especially who are not yet born and who are just born, and that age group. The second I would like to mention is about Dr. Gokul Rajendra. He has an app called the Govardhan app, which lists all the indigenous medicinal plants which are there in the world. He is a great travel blogger, and he has gone from South America to the Far East. We're very proud of his work. And what are his key recommendations from his work is that we could have mini pods in cities, developing or non-developing, giving these medicinal plants for minor ailments like cough and cold. So there's kind of an awareness in the general population that you can have a sustainable living with nature, which is beneficial for your health as well as which is beneficial for the planet. And everyone starts getting a connection with the planet and starts understanding the importance of people and planet and everyone else. Then two more I would like to mention is Mr. Shamim Nada. He's from Bangladesh. He works in the coastal region of Cox's Bazar. And Cox's Bazar is a region populated with Rohingya refugees. And he has been researching and working on climate change affecting the salinity of water in the coastal region, and that affecting the menstrual health of girls in that region, girls and women. So we need more support for such individuals. And another one, which I think is very important, and I think my colleague Omnia would, coincide, and we had the discussion of, the dearth of research in the MENA region. So we have Ms. Hajar, and she's a MSc in environmental economics, and she worked on how environmental policies affects the health system, talking about carbon legislation and carbon tax and everything. And her recommendation was narrowing this research into decarbonizing the healthcare sector. So it's vital that we get support for youth like Hajar in this region, who are research, not only in terms of research or funding, but also in terms of giving them access to be able to reach stakeholders and having their voice represented at the right table. So lastly, I would like thank the COP27 presidency and the work of my fellow colleague here, who was the COP27 youth champion, for uplifting the voice of youth. And I think that is a great start, and I'm sure we'll lead up to incredible achievements in the future. And ecstatic for the health care system, or the healthcare society community, is that the Global Health Day has been announced. So we look forward for strong youth representation, especially of youth who have done incredible on-ground work. And finally, applauding the efforts of the Youth Climate Champions team and Her Highness Al-Shama for her work in the uplifting youth voice, and not only of the national youth, but also the international youth. So a very happy about that. So hopefully we'll have great commitments this year.
Thanks so much, Deena. And thank you for all those stories that really make it clear and tangible, some of the extraordinary work that's going on all throughout the globe. I think it's absolutely right that we need those youth voices at the table, participating in a meaningful way. And as you noted, that language is all great, but we really need that dialogue to be real, because your voices, as I said, have been inspiring and have been forward-looking in a way that I think we all acknowledge and appreciate so much. Last but certainly not least, I want to turn to Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah his flight was delayed, so we were a bit concerned that he wasn't going to make it here, but we are so thrilled that he is. Isaiah is the climate change youth advocate for the official youth constituency of UNFCCC, YOUNGO, as well as an intern at the local Ministry of Health in his home country, Trinidad and Tobago. We're so happy, I think, to have a panelist who's from a small island developing state in the Caribbean, because I think he's going to bring a particular perspective to this issue. He believes the world can achieve all 17 Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 for both planetary and human health. So definitely want to push him on how we're going to do that by 2030. But with that, over to you, Isaiah.
Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, so as we started, we mentioned that over 70% of all youth worldwide are concerned about climate change. And this is a very real fear, as Omnia are mentioning, that it affects not just our physical health, but also our mental health. And it's based on very real premise that the destruction of climate change is very widespread and it affects everyone. Even presently, I think, we believe yesterday, the cyclone Freddy devastated Malawi nations. And I have friends in Malawi, and they showed me, their entire villages were lost, and how important loss and damages and the funds are important to protecting future generations and preserving cultures. Because, as you say, it's not just the physical health, but also the intangible things, like the languages of indigenous youth, the culture, the indigenous medicines, like our friend Goku, who catalogs these things. So all these things are definitely affected, not just by the extreme weather events, but also like the heat and the ability to grow these crops that may have cures to disease that we may encounter in the future, zoonotic diseases that may prevent future pandemics. So it's very important that youth are involved in education, empowerment, and touching back on Goku, who's also spreading these tools, like the application he's using, that helps the entire world. And anything that can help, especially in my context in Trinidad and Tobago, it's a small island developing state, we're still developing. But on the ground, a lot of youth aren't really aware of how their choices and their lifestyle affect climate change and the effects of polluters, big polluters on the global north affecting those in the global south like us. And we really have to educate them so that they know that they could hold the people in power accountable for the things that they do, and as well as be accountable for our own actions, because we also, even though we're a small island developing state, we also produce oil, and it's just a fossil fuel, which is cause for the climate change. And a lot of people are kind of unaware, very unaware, like blissfully unaware of how damaging the fossil fuel is. And part of empowering everyone is to educate them on primary, secondary, and tertiary levels. And not just these students, but also the trainers and the teachers. And you're doing this in context-specific topics. For example, I'm also representative for Food at Cup, I'm representing the t-shirt here, Yongo. And, sustainable diet is part of, mostly red meats. They cause about 30% of the emissions of greenhouse gases, which is just number 2 under fossil fuels. And a lot of people may be unaware, and it's like beef, the cows, they don't really see the connection. So there's a lot of disconnect between the reality and what is perceived. And part of that is really, what actually helped for me is the online courses. So I got a sponsorship with the Commonwealth, and I got to study like 1 billion courses online related to climate change. And it was free, and it really was a game changer for me, because I only became aware of climate change in 2019, to be honest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's true. Just my degree in food science and technology, I was like, I really want to be involved in the United Nations, because they're involved in human rights and human security and peace. And then it's like an explosion of all the different threats to our existence. And, that's feedback. that if this will impact could change my perspective, just imagine how that could affect the entire population in a country and really have a domino effect on all of the youth and all the families and communities and by extension the nation be able to rise up and take action now, because you can't act later. We have to act now to prevent the greater impact of climate change and keep everything temperature below 1.5 degrees or less, because our small islands like Trinidad and Tobago will disappear in these temperatures. So more concrete frameworks is the Article 6 of the UNFCCC Framework Convention on Climate Change, which directly refers to the involvement of youth and participation in public awareness and being actually involved. So this was agreed to by all the parties and all the COPs. So what really needs to be done is being accounted for. Is it really happening?
Yeah.
Or they're just signing a piece of paper? And there's a whole list, I could go on all day of how many different agreements. There's Article 10 of the Kyoto Protocol. Right now in our region, in Caribbean, there's the Escazú Agreement, which is Latin America and Caribbean. And my country hasn't signed on yet, but we're looking to push for that. And directly, it says that we need to integrate young people, like right now in all the education, and there must be a national policy and direct institutions to channel the youth to be involved in climate action and be youth decision makers. And one good thing is that my Ministry of Youth Development and National Services, they actually determined that it was very important to have a youth policy that articulated that youth must be involved. And so far, not much accountability on it, but I definitely look forward to be working with ministers locally to help them push that, to have local conferences. And I know that's part of what I see is a very promising future for us in that aspect.
Oh, good. Well, I love that optimism, Isaiah. I think we all need a dose of that. I mean, I know that we had talked a little bit about the Security Council Resolution 2250, yes. And I know that the idea is really to engage youth and bring them to the table at the local level, at the national level, at the regional level, and at the multilateral sort of international community level. I wondered, you know, if you can talk about sort of where you think it's lacking the most and how can we all support further engagement by youth at all of these different tables, at these different levels. And it's sort of a question for all of you, but just sort of pushing you on your optimism. Like, tell us what you need to make this a reality.
I think we need to move away. We need to transition from the kind of factory setting. Like, you go to school, you get a job, have a family, that's it. You have no concern about the environment, the system around you, just unaware. You know, as they say, smell the roses, you just living your life day after day, sort of ritual. And we need to sort of, I don't want to say be woke, but wake up to what's happening around us. And I think part of that has to come from the top of the decision leaders as well as on the ground. So one of the great things about Youngo, like what we are part of, is that we are able to create spaces for youth to actually talk to each other and, you know, lessen the anxiety that we share about the future. And we need to like amplify these spaces to create safe spaces for us to voice our opinions. Because I think when it comes to like probably some of the older generation, they may not see it as a now problem for them. They might say, you know, which is a misconception that it's a future problem. Climate change is a future problem, like their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. But it's actually right now we're in big trouble. And creating these spaces through youth organizations are definitely, I think, I can see from my experience, is really helpful in amplifying the motivation for people.
Yeah, I think I would like to add on that is, you know, the most problematic situations which we have is at all levels, but majorly at the local level, because at the local level is where the implementation is maximum. So for example, I think me and my colleague was discussing yesterday about, the deans of medical colleges being very unsupportive and unresponsive and unapproachable when we go and tell them that, we want a climate change and health curriculum within our curriculum, so that we feel more equipped. And even if I go and showcase and present my research to them, it's very difficult to convince them. So I think the top pressure should kind of focus on and building capacity, or building that kind of intergenerational trust, because there is still lack of trust from the older generation to the younger generation, and it should seep into the local level. This is what I believe should be very important right now.
Interesting. Omnia, I have a separate question for you, but do you want to add on to this?
Yeah, I think what's important as well, because I totally agree, and I see that creating a space for young people, not just for us to share our perspectives, but for us to emerge with the solutions that we already have the potential to. One good example, and it's also not difficult to create that space within either governments, private sector, different institutions and universities. For example, the UN Secretary General for the past 3 years created a youth advisory group to advise him on how to work on climate change. And this year is the second cohort, because it was such a great mobilization of youth perspectives directly into his work. But then when we look at entities like the Global Center on Adaptation, which is more focusing on implementation, it's a private institution, they also created a youth sounding board that advises their work when it comes to how to integrate youth-led adaptation solutions into their investments, into their consultations with countries. And for example, I'm also part of the youth sounding board, which works with the European Commission, because the DG responsible for international partnerships want to start working with young people, but it would only make sense to have youth from the global south and from globally to advise on how to create this youth external action plan. So really creating these advisory groups or sounding boards is a good way of mentoring young people to understand systems and how these institutions work, so that we are able to make demands that are relevant, that can be implemented. And we're in a way as well, the key actors and the different stakeholders are learning from the work that we're doing. And we're also bringing that sense of urgency into what they do, that sense of creativity and optimism, and really this pushing forward into the work that is being done on the government level, but also on the research and the policy side.
Well, I imagine our audience wants to hear about kind of what you hope will come out of COP28. And I want to open up the floor to questions, but before we do, I'm going to take the initiative to ask you one question. I was intrigued by what you said about sort of the linkages between climate change and mental health. And I know you're doing some interesting work in this space, so maybe just to tell us a little bit about what you're finding, and whether it's a growing problem that we should all be really aware of.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this, because right now there is a huge focus on climate and health, and we also have the Health Day, which is amazing. But one area that is consistently missing when it comes to data around it, when it comes to policies, is climate change and mental health. Right now, when we look at disaster risk reduction and climate strategies, it is missing that mental health component. And on the other hand, when we look at mental health and psychosocial support programs, it is missing the climate change component. So very basically, practitioners do not know how to address climate anxiety and ecological grief. We don't have the data around it, and we don't have the tools, the policy tools, as well as the ways that we can deal with it. So right now I'm working with Imperial College, with the climate cares team, and we're going to focus this year on looking into climate change and mental health research, but really bringing in the regional perspectives, the lived experience perspectives, the youth perspective into the work that we're doing. So really look out for April 18th. This is going to be our official launch event on what we are going to do for the next year around climate change and mental health.
That's amazing. I think we can open it up to you all if you have questions for this extraordinary group of panelists. Any takers? Please.
Hi, my name's Amelia Yo from Malaria No More UK. Thank you so much for not only your panel presentations today, but your leadership in this area. I think some of you at least were here yesterday and saw the range of presentations from this extraordinary group of people in the room and the organisations we represent. You've given some good general guidelines on how we can be accountable to supporting youth leadership in the climate and health space. Are there specific things that you would like to ask of this group in terms of how we can work with you and other young leaders in the run-up to COP28 and beyond?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think some of the specific things, we and our colleagues kind of discussed was, there could be a launch of probably a WHO youth ambassador, because at least for the conversations at COP28, because it's very essential that we have a bridging gap, at least right now with the health day being announced. So it's important that there is health youth representation in the health day. So for COP28, yeah, this could be a specific demand. Other than that, which is the gap which we need to fill is research, and involving youth in your work. Do open opportunities for us. We want to involve in the existing research you have. We will help you expand in the regions which there is a gap. So do reach out to us on that. If you have any innovative technologies and you want support, we have youth with motivation who want to help and work together in that, what I mentioned earlier, like the local communities have the gap of intergenerational trust. So have trust on us. Trust is that would be my core pillar. Trust us and we will give back to you. We will give you the right advice and we will help in mobilizing the efforts you are doing, and you can help mobilize our efforts, and that's where the climate crisis can be taken care of.
Go ahead. Isaiah?
I would say specifically, I know last year, YOUNGO, we had a calculation of about 65% of all the activities were youth-related or youth-involved. So I would probably want to push that to probably 80 to 90%. And to add on to, probably more green jobs, more opportunities around that, more speaking opportunities for youth around the world.
Yes, there were two, when I started my term, there were two key challenges that all young people voiced when we asked them about what do you need from the presidency for COP27. The first one was the accessibility in terms of how to be part of not just COP, but also the events that are leading up to COP. So it's very important to think about how getting youth to attend, to be participants, to co-design the sessions, all the preparatory forums and workshops, even if it's not COP, but all what takes place in preparation for it, because it really helps them understand that policy and advocacy side. And the second thing was funding, especially that young people do their own grassroots initiatives. Most are volunteers, and it doesn't have to be incredible amount of funding. Just seed funding and microgrants can really go a long way, especially in really elevating and amplifying these small-scale solutions and giving it that small push. And if it's not funding, mentorship is also important to really bring in more potential, or the solutions that they're offering gets that potential that it has.
Any other questions from the audience?
Hi, I am Dr. Shiba. Actually, I am a OB-GYN specialist as well as I am a clinical teacher. So I completely agree with Dr. Deena, Mariyam, because I believe that it is so very difficult to convince the stakeholders to integrate planetary health and climate change into the undergraduate medical curriculum. Because a study showed that only less than 15% of med schools have integrated planetary health and climate change into the curriculum. So like it should not be only the undergraduate medical curriculum, it should be the postgraduate medical curriculum, it should be part of the faculty development because healthcare almost contributes 5.2% of green gas emission. So even faculty development, that is very, very important. And not alone medical schools, why should we narrow it down only to the doctors? It should be an interprofessional group of healthcare professionals because at all levels we need this language transmission and beyond that, I believe that this curriculum integration should happen even at the school level because they are the kids. When they start practicing it, it becomes a habit. And when it becomes a habit, in the future it will become their culture. So I said that because both my sons are doctors. They studied in a boarding school back in India, but every time when they travel anywhere, they carry the straw which is made in brass and they carry a glass. Because not because of me, because of the school. The school where they were taught that planetary health and environmental health is very, very important. So we should catch them early. Why not start sensitizing even the school kids? But for all this to become a reality, I think we need a lot of policy and system support, organizational support, institutional support, and knowledge generation and the translation of the knowledge into the practice. So we need all these supports for this to become the reality. And I personally believe that education has got a very, very important role to play in the field of planetary health and climate change.
So I think we may be out of time, but it's a great note to end on in some ways because the work that you all are doing is so incredible, but it's true that we need so much more, and so grateful to all of you for kind of showing us the way and, again, sort of pushing us forward. I know from the multilateral space that I was previously in that the youth voices have really made climate change and health urgent in a way that it wasn't before. So your voices are being heard, but you absolutely need to be at all these tables. The local capacity is key, and Isaiah, our resident optimist, I think, let's hope that we can meet all the SDGs by 2030. And I urge the folks in this room to support these wonderful voices and the work that they're doing. Please join me in thanking them.